In this session of our Tormek instructional video series, let's sharpen some knives. Now, a lot of folks that own a Tormek, or if they're thinking about getting a Tormek, ask me, why do we have two knife jigs? When do you use one and when do you use the other? The SVM-45 regular knife jig can handle a knife of any length up to 14 inches as long as the blade is relatively stiff, like this chef's knife. The SVM-100 long knife jig is designed for blades that are not just long, but long and flexible, like this fillet knife. Other than the extra clamping support of the SVM-100, the two jigs are identical and work exactly the same. Today we're going to be using the SVM-45 on this 13-inch chef's knife. To start, we're going to take the knife and put it into the knife jig with the cutting edge of the knife and the front edge of the jig approximately parallel with each other. We're going to use the small knob first to clamp it, and then the large knob gives you a leverage effect that gives you a very secure grip on that blade. This section of the knife jig is called the head, and the head is going to rest against the universal tool support to give us the proper grinding angle. Now, for kitchen knives, hunting knives, pocket knives, pretty much everything except carving knives and fillet knives, we want to grind a 40-degree bevel angle on that blade. Now, remember, on a knife we're grinding both sides, so a 40-degree bevel angle is really two 20-degree bevel angles. The steel is also very thin right at the cutting edge, so measuring that 40-degree angle would be very difficult. What we're going to do instead is measure each side, which is 20 degrees. We can measure that directly to the body of the blade. It's much easier to see what we're doing. So, we'll take our setup gauge called the Angle Master. We're going to put the pointer on 20 degrees. The other side is adjusted to the diameter of the grindstone, in this case 245 millimeters. Then we're going to put the head of the knife jig on the universal tool support and the blade of the knife onto the stone and check our angle. We're going to get in the neighborhood by adjusting the height of the universal tool support. Made much easier now that we have the micro adjust bar. When we get close, the head of the knife jig is threaded, which becomes a micro adjuster, making it very easy to dial in an exact fit. And there's a lock to make sure the jig stays secured once you find your point. Now, if you saw Norm build this stand on the new Yankee workshop, you know that it has a pull-out step, which is very nice for tools like knives where you'd like to be above your work looking down on what's going on. So we're going to start the machine. One thing we want to talk about here is using the stone grater. When you're sharpening knives on the Tormek, very seldom are you going to need the faster cutting action of 220 grit. For the most part, you want to use the 1000 grit cut only. So we're going to use our stone grater and polish the surface of the stone down to the 1000 grit cut before we get started. Now, if you have a knife that is very badly beat up, lots of nicks, it's been used for the wrong things, go ahead and use the faster cutting action for a few moments to get the majority of the nicks out, and then go to your 1000 grit cut. But for maintenance, the 1000 grit cut is all you'll need for most knives. Put the head of the knife jig onto the universal tool support and begin grinding. Now, as we come to the curve of the blade, I'm going to follow that curve by picking up on the handle of the knife. The best thing to do here is to watch the water flow as it comes up onto your knife. As long as the water is flowing over the majority of the edge, you should be in pretty good shape as far as alignment to the grindstone. 2 or 3 passes on that side. Now we're going to turn it over. We don't have to reset the jig. We don't have to take the knife out and turn it over. Just turn the whole thing over, and there's exactly the same bevel angle for the other side of your blade. It's a perfect mirror image of itself, so you know you're going to have the same bevel on both sides. One thing I'd like to point out here is following the bevel to make sure that we have a consistent bevel all the way around the blade. A lot of folks look at the knife jig, they see the radius here on the corner and decide that that's how you want to follow the curve of the blade, is by going this way, and that's going to mess up your bevel. What you want to do is go this way, okay? I'm going to do this again one more time so you can see what's going on. We're going to follow that curve by picking up on the handle of the knife. One more pass on the other side. And we have our blade ground. Now we're going to take it out of the jig. We're going to turn the Tormek around. Put a little bit of honing compound on our leather wheel. And now we're going to polish that edge out to a mirror finish. This is going to remove the wire edge and refine the scratch pattern in the steel. The finer that edge is, the finer the scratch pattern on the edge is, the longer the edge is going to last. Now this is not a difficult thing to do, even though you see we're not using any of our control systems. Basically, you just want to get that bevel on the leather. And you'll also notice I'm working at a skew angle relative to the leather. That's so I don't run into the grindstone. It also makes it a bit easier to feel the bevel on the leather. A few times going back and forth. Wipe off any residue. And now a question comes up from time to time, how do you test that edge? How do you know whether that edge is truly sharp or not? Let me give you a couple of methods. One is to take a piece of paper. Now you may have seen me do this on the chisel demonstration too. And if you can slice through that paper with absolute control, without the knife catching or grabbing or tearing the paper, you've got a good sharp edge. Another way to test it is with your thumbnail. If you can rest the blade on your thumbnail and it catches, your edge is sharp. If it slides, it's not sharp. Now you're not supposed to cut your thumbnail, you're supposed to rest it on there and see if it catches. If it slides, you're not there yet. If it just catches, you know you've got a perfect cutting edge, which we certainly do on this knife. Thanks for watching. We're going to have demonstrations on our other jigs as well. Be sure and catch them all.